And we're joined by Stellenbosch University's Professor Mark Swilling, who is accusing the United States President Donald Trump of wanting to rule the world by fear. He believes that South Africa is being punished for its stance on the Israel-Hamas war through the signing of an executive order to cut funding to South Africa. Washington claims that it's due to the signing of the Land Expropriation Act and the apparent bad treatment of Afrikaners, among other things. Well, Professor Swilling is with us now to discuss some of what he has said in his article. Professor Swilling, good evening to you, and thank you very much for your time. I want to start with some of what you have captured in your piece, and I'm going to begin with the question that you ask in that very opinion piece. You say, why South Africa? There's a question mark, and you say, how did we get caught up in this mess? I'd like for you to explain that to us and the viewers.
Well, what I was trying to say is that the shutting down of US aid support within South Africa was going to happen anyway, because Trump and Musk had already targeted and made clear that they were going to target and shut down US aid. So that was going to happen anyway. So the question then becomes, why was it then necessary to then say, well, USAID's operations in South Africa or support programs in South Africa are because of the land grabs taking place, in the alleged land grabs taking place in South Africa. And so the question is, how did we get caught up in this mess? Because it would have happened anyway, so that's not the real reason. And essentially, I point out that over quite a number of years, the white right wing in South Africa has cultivated links with the mega movement, the right wing racist movement in the US. That is the social base of Trumpism, and it's the messaging that has been transferred into that very powerful movement now, because it's represented in the White House. The messaging from the white right into the right-wing movement in the US has now exploded in our faces, because Trump believes these messages, even though there's no empirical evidence.
Yeah, and it's interesting how you sort of try to connect the dots in your article, because you say it would seem that there has been work in the background in the lead up to Trump being elected, and when it became clear that he was going to become president of the United States, it would seem that there was almost a packaging of some of the clips that we are now seeing being brought up on social media and therefore being presented to Trump as evidence. And we saw some of that this past weekend, a clip of Julius Malema, a clip of Mngxitama. Is that what you are alluding to, that this has now reached this crescendo?
Yeah, but don't forget, this goes back to the first Trump administration, and where there were already these links in place. So between the first administration and the second one, the relationships between the white right and the mega movement in the US have deepened, and the white right and AfriForum in particular have made no secret of their messaging. They have very active social media presence. They have created this illusion that whites are persecuted in this black majority rule society, and that people who are looking for evidence of persecution of white people should take notice of it. That's their messaging.
Yeah.
And that gets fused together with the agenda of the Musk-Trump regime that has seized power in the US, and and in the process, the fusing of that messaging into what was already a deep skepticism that Trump has about South Africa and the way in which black rule is seemingly successful and has got white support. And for him, this can't be possible. The underlying assumption of racists is that all black people hate white people, and if they have power, they're going to persecute white people. That's the logic of the racist mind.
I'd like for us to talk about another section of your article where you say there is clearly a disjuncture between what is claimed as to the persecution of Afrikaners or white people in South Africa versus the realities on the ground in South Africa. And you caption that in the section that you call Inequality Explained. Talk to us about exactly what the realities are in South Africa that perhaps Trump should be aware of.
Well, over the last couple of years, researchers at the University of Cape Town and Stellenbosch and Wits have assembled a way of analyzing inequality in South Africa, which is very different to how it used to be. It used to be about the Gini coefficient, which is unequal incomes. But these researchers have stitched together, using tax data and other databases, a way of understanding the wealth of South African households. In other words, the assets and liabilities of each one of us. And that allows them to then analyze who has the most wealth and who has the least wealth. And what the numbers show is that the richest 0.1%, which is about 35,000 South African adults, that 0.1%, the wealth of that 0.1% is equal to twice the total wealth of the bottom 90%. So that's an extreme level of inequality. And internationally, we're one of the most unequal societies in the world. And when you look at the top 10%, or the top 1% in particular, the top 10% is now probably around 60% black. But the top 1% is overwhelmingly white. And if you look at the trajectory of wealth inequality in South Africa since 1994, it's got worse. And the rich have got richer, in particular the super rich, and the bottom 50% of society is getting poorer. And so it's in that context that we need to try, ask questions about this narrative that somehow whites are getting persecuted. All you have to do is read Peter du Toit's book, The Stellenbosch Mafia, about how successful a whole bunch of Afrikaners were post-94. And so there's this narrative of whites getting persecuted, which really derives from a racist assumption that if whites are in a minority and you have a black government, whites are going to be persecuted by definition from that perspective. But empirically, it's just not true. Whites have actually, rich whites in particular have got richer.
Yeah.
And so this completely contradicts the persecution thesis. Obviously, there are white people at the bottom of the pyramid who aren't doing so well and are not that different to the lower black middle class, and are struggling under debt and rising electricity prices and so on.
Does that explain, therefore, Professor Swilling, the almost tracking back by AfriForum at the weekend, who were saying, yes, we would love to take up your help, President Trump, but we would rather take up that help here at home? Does that explain why they are unlikely to take up the offer to become Afrikaner refugees in the United States?
Well, they've probably maybe had a few discussions with people who were given refugee status in the US and discovered that it's not exactly a nice place to be in the US. You don't have a lot of rights. And so, their conditions are going to get worse. I think what they're really worried about is the reaction of Trump and the ambassador who Trump wants to send here, have a perception that could justify excluding South Africa from AGOA, which gives South Africa preferential trade access to the US market, which is very valuable. And if we are excluded from AGOA, one of the big losers is going to be white farmers, who AfriForum claims to represent. And, this thing has exploded in their faces, and I think they're going to want to back off from the way in which the situation has been interpreted. So, yeah, I mean, I think what they need to do is dispel this image of the persecution of whites. I mean, the examples that are given of farms that have been invaded by groups of black people, and then the assumption is that the black government, therefore, is sanctioning the invasion of those farms, even though legal action has been taken against those invaders of those farms. That is not explained. It's just an assumption that, if some blacks invade white farms, all white blacks want to invade all white farms. I mean, that's how the racist mind works. And that needs to be dispelled. And yes, we have problems, we have challenges, but to remove the support to the poorest black people of South Africa because of a perception that all black people are persecuting all white people, I mean, that just makes no sense whatsoever. And that needs to be undone.
How big a responsibility, therefore, Professor Swilling, not on the part of AfriForum or Solidarity, because this serves them, how big a responsibility do you think this is on the shoulders of political parties such as the Freedom Front Plus? You have heard the leader today in Parliament saying he's an Afrikaner and he is here to stay. Those were his words. The responsibility of parties that are perceived to be parties that represent white interests, and I'm pointing here to the Democratic Alliance. How big a responsibility should leaders of those parties have to not only explain this here at home, which could lead to a possible, race war, but to explain it also overseas, particularly in America?
Yeah, I mean, I think on the whole, they've been quite responsible. I mean, Agri-SA's statement was good, and I think it's reflected in some of the statements that the parties who so-called represent white interests have all said, we are South Africans, we're staying, this doesn't make sense. So, I think that's positive. What all parties, including the governing party, all parties have a responsibility to make sure that all farmers have a chance to build their businesses, their farming businesses. And that's not always true on the ground. I mean, both black and white farmers will tell you how difficult it is to run their businesses on the ground because of corrupt officials, black farmers who haven't got their title deeds, the community property associations which have been corrupted and not being productive, and a whole range of negative impacts on local black and white farmers. So what we should be having a discussion about is agriculture and all farmers and how we support them. And that's what should be uniting us. And that's what will prevent people like Trump and Musk from exploiting a very emotive, very, very deeply emotional and divisive political dynamics around the land question. That's what we should be talking about. And we should be also recognizing that more and more black farmers actually are buying previously white land, but there's also state land that is not being productively used that could be brought into the mix. These are the kinds of conversations we should be having.
Professor Mark Swilling, thank you very much for your time. He is with the University of Stellenbosch.